Did you know? The Kingdom Hearts series has done an admirable job in retaining the original actors when considering the high pedigree of the work, presumably thanks to the high control and influence Disney holds. But they have their limits, most often as a result of the film being adapted into the game being so old, or the casting of more expensive celebrities in their films thanks to the influence of Robin Williams' Genie in Aladdin. All taken together, it's a common piece of trivia that the very first Kingdom Hearts world that featured all of its original voices is Deep Space in Birth by Sleep. But that just got me wondering, how true is that? It's not that I doubt the accuracy of that statement, I was just curious how it breaks down with every other world in the series, and I did the research to chart it all out. What other worlds got close, and how do each of the games compare? I did this for each of the games that have full voice acting for the Disney worlds and ran the numbers to be shared with all of you. Let's lay down the ground rules first. Only worlds that are based on a specific movie can be counted, so 100 Acre Woods is a no-go since there's so many variants of Winnie the Pooh and no one is specifically being adapted, so who counts as the original voice is too vague. Second, they must be in their own contained world. Beast and Belle appearing in Hollow Bastion in Kingdom Hearts 1 doesn't count, but the same characters in Beast's Castle in Kingdom Hearts 2 does. Third, we are only counting those original actors. Plenty of the voices heard in Kingdom Hearts have played these characters in one of the multitude of products Disney releases with their legacy properties, but that's beyond the scope of this video. Finally, we're only looking at the English voices here. Since Disney is an American company, those are the originals. And since the final mix editions of the games contained these voices, Square Enix agrees. Now, before we get started, we do need to talk about the big hitch in this project. See, while the KH originals and Square Enix characters are properly credited across the entire series, the voices for Disney characters are simply lumped together without character names attached, which makes it a lot more difficult to say who's voicing who. Some of them are obvious. When Goofy sounds exactly the same as he always has and his usual voice actor is credited, it's pretty clear where that one goes. But some of the others aren't so lucky. I used the KH Wiki for my research, and while they often don't cite their source when definitively claiming a voice actor, I cross-referenced my list with the credits and found nothing out of place, and the fact that they do note when a citation is needed, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. With all that said, our starting point is Wonderland. Now, the original Disney Alice in Wonderland film released in 1951, 51 years prior to Kingdom Hearts, so it follows the former reasoning outlined earlier of being too old to realistically get the same actors back. Except, famously, they did. Catherine Beaumont reprised her role as Alice, and has actually continued to do so as recently as 2023. It really is very cool, though she's the only one. Verna Felton is replaced by Tress MacNeille as the Queen of Hearts, and Bill Thompson and Joseph Kearns are both replaced by Corey Burton as the White Rabbit and Doorknob respectively. You know what, let's start a Corey Burton count. Olympus Coliseum is a very small world with a very small cast, but you know James Woods will always return to be Hades. And he's the only one. Danny DeVito probably has no clue what a video game is, so he's replaced by Robert Costanzo. Little story, I didn't see Hercules for a long time, well after I'd played a lot of Kingdom Hearts, so it was weird hearing DeVito. And Hercules, for the only time, is not played by Tate Donovan, but Sean Astin. This one is weird to me. I don't mean to disparage Mr. Donovan's worth, but how was it easier and or cheaper to get Samwise in the middle of Lord of the Rings? At the time of Kingdom Hearts 1's release, Tarzan was only 3 years old, which is nearly the shortest gap between film and Kingdom Hearts world in the series. If that made it easier to retain the actors? Well, 50% is the best we've seen thus far. Tony Goldwyn and Brian Blessed return as Tarzan and Clayton respectively, though Minnie Driver is too big a name as Jane, succeeded by Nia Kelly. Has Minnie Driver ever played Minnie Mouse? It seems like a missed opportunity. And you know what? I'm counting Turk's one scream because it wasn't Rosie O'Donnell, but Audrey Wasilewski. Why do we know that? Over in Agrabah, things are looking much better actually. Scott Weiner, Linda Larkin, Jonathan Freeman, Gilbert Gottfried, everyone is here. Except Robin Williams, of course. This was well after him and Disney reconciled and Williams returned for The King of Thieves, but Dan Castellaneta took the part of the genie back afterwards. We were so close to a better tomorrow. Starting our new life under the sea, Atlantica, they seemingly only cared enough to get the major characters. Jodie Benson for Ariel, Kenneth Mars for Triton, and Pat Carroll for Ursula. But only them. Kevin Michael Richardson replaces Samuel E. Wright as Sebastian, and Eli Russell Linnitz replaces Jason Marin as Flounder. Oh, and Corey Burton takes over from Patty Edwards as both Flotsam and Jetsam. Forever Halloween in Halloween Town, this is actually the world in the first game with the most characters, 8 compared to Atlantica's 7. Even lower accuracy though. They got Chris Sarandon as Jack, that tracks, every one of his video game appearances is Jack Skellington. Oh, spoilers. Ken Page is also back as Oogie Boogie, and if I'm being honest, those are the two I would demand if I had to. Dr. Finkelstein has gone from William Hickey to Jess Harnell, and the mayor has gone from Glenn Shaddix to Jeff Bennett. And then there's Lock, Shock, and Barrel. In the film, they were voiced by Paul Rubens, Catherine O'Hara, and Danny Elfman, the latter two playing double duty with Sally and Jack singing. Kingdom Hearts had the same idea, with Jess Harnell, Kath Soucie, and Jeff Bennett. Oh yeah, the KH Wiki needs a citation on Kath Soucie as Sally, but since we know she was Shock and Sally and Shock had the same voice originally, I can believe it. We would be going to Neverland next, but we got eaten by a whale. It happens. Again, Pinocchio is an old movie, over 60 years old at the time of the game's release, so it's no surprise that none of the original actors return. Tony Pope instead of Christian Rubb for Geppetto, and I'm counting Jiminy Cricket as part of this world, Eddie Carroll instead of Cliff Edwards. Pinocchio himself went from Dickie Jones to Seth Adkins, which is notable because Adkins had played Pinocchio 2 years prior in the ABC television film Geppetto. It's still Disney, so I guess that was close enough. With that in mind, I'm disappointed Geppetto was not voiced by Drew Carey. Finally, we end up in Neverland, or at least Captain Hook's ship. Pan himself is voiced by Chris Steele rather than Bobby Driscoll for obvious reasons, while Jeff Bennett takes over from Bill Thompson as Smee and Corey Burton from Hans Conried as Hook. Actually, Burton started his voice acting career at age 17 imitating Conried, so it really all came full circle. And hey, in the original movie, Catherine Beaumont also played Wendy, so she reprises that role all these years later as well. People just don't talk about it as much because Peter Pan released 2 years after Alice in Wonderland, so I guess it's just not as impressive a gap. And that's Kingdom Hearts 1. Final tally, 38 Disney characters with 14 being their original actors, for an accuracy score of 36.84%. More than a third, that's not too bad. But Kingdom Hearts 2 is a bigger game in every sense. How does it stack up in this specific competition? Things start off very strong in the Land of Dragons, with a significant portion of characters returning. Even minor roles like Chen Po, Ling, and Yao are still their original actors. Well, minor in the case of this game. And Pat Morita returns as the Emperor. I was all set to say this was his final role since he passed away 4 months before the English release of the game. But that would be wrong, he somehow still had a dozen appearances afterwards. I get a posthumous role or two a year after death, but someone's gonna have to explain this to me. The only replacements are Mushu with Mark Mosley instead of Eddie Murphy, and Shan Yu with Corey Burton instead of Miguel Ferrer. And the good times continue in the Beast's castle. Not only can we now count the return of Robbie Benson and Paige O'Hare as Beast and Belle respectively, but the various servants of the castle mostly reprise their roles as well. The only exception being Lumiere, who is now voiced by Jeff Bennett instead of Jerry Orbach. It's a shame that Chip doesn't have any voiced lines, because in The Enchanted Christmas, he was voiced by Haley Joel Osment.
Kingdom Hearts fans were furious he did not play both parts in the games, and angry at absolutely nothing else.
In our return to the Olympus Coliseum, there's just so many characters to talk about. Look at those packed stands. Okay, this time they actually got Tate Donovan as Hercules, and with the addition of Megara as a character, she's voiced by Susan Egan once more. Still no Danny DeVito though. Shame, we could have had DeVito telling us to get up on the Hydra's back. Now we could move on, but I think it's time for some finny fun in Atlantica. It's been said and criticized many times that both Atlantica worlds are basically telling the same story, so it's no surprise that the same characters and same actors appear. They still couldn't get Samuel E. Wright for Sebastian, and Flounder is now Parker Goris. At least Prince Eric appears now, and it marked the return of Christopher Daniel Barnes after being replaced in the second film. Continuing on the seas, we dock at Port Royal, the first live-action Disney movie to be adapted into Kingdom Hearts. Try to be shocked no original actors return. Not a surprise, these are much higher profile actors to just show up in a video game, and more importantly, higher paid. At one point, Johnny Depp was the highest paid actor in Hollywood. Kingdom Hearts 2 was not going to get him. So instead, James Arnold Taylor plays Jack Sparrow. Will Turner is played by Crispin Freeman instead of Orlando Bloom, Elizabeth Swann is played by Eliza Schneider instead of Keira Knightley, and Barbossa is played by Brian George instead of Jeffrey Rush. Now the Kingdom Hearts wiki lists 3 of the pirate enemies as having voices. They're unnamed within the game themselves, so I initially didn't intend on including them, since there's no comparison to be made. However, IMDb gives them all names of characters from the movie, and I've never seen Curse of the Black Pearl, so I don't know if they share the designs and that's where they were assigned names. What I can confirm is their Kingdom Hearts voice actors being Beau Billingsley, Adam Leadbeater, and John DiMaggio are not in the movie in any form. The actors aren't credited under Disney voices, but additional voices, so maybe they don't count as Disney characters. It's the return of Sora in Agrabah, and there's not a lot to say. For the most part, the same characters and voices from the first game's iteration of the world, including Dan Castellaneta as the genie. However, since this one is more so based on Return of Jafar, I would argue that Dan Castellaneta is the original voice this time. Even Abu's noises are still Frank Welker, which... those have gotta be archive audio from the film's recordings, right? They didn't get him back in the booth to make the same sounds, did they? So is this actually the first Kingdom Hearts world with all the original actors? Oh, so close but not quite, because they had to add the peddler. Okay, so this guy isn't actually in Return of Jafar, at least not in a speaking role and not on screen. He's the one that sings Arabian Nights, which appears in the movie, but I wasn't sure whether that counted. After all, if he's not in the movie, he shouldn't be used as a point of comparison, right? Well, technically, he is there, even if it is just his singing voice, provided by Bruce Adler. And it's definitely not Robin Williams from the first movie. And the original intent was the peddler was the same character as the genie, so by that logic, it should be Dan Castellaneta. Either way, Corey Burton would not be the right choice. Again, Halloween Town is much the same as before, aside from getting Glenn Shaddix as the mayor this time. The inclusion of Christmas Town also means Sandy Claus makes an appearance, but instead of being voiced by Ed Ivory, it's Corey Burton. That surprised me when I was doing this research, it sounded so similar to my ears. The Pride Lands is next, holding the record for the world with the most characters as of yet, 11 characters. Which, if you remember the prolific cast The Lion King had, you can probably already see where this is going. Well, to start, I theorized that Abu was archive audio, but we know for a fact that old recordings of James Earl Jones and Jonathan Taylor Thomas as Mufasa and young Simba were used. Other than that, you get Ernie Sabella as Pumbaa and Robert Guillaume as Rafiki. Simba is Cam Clark instead of Matthew Broderick, and Timon is Bruce Lanoil instead of Nathan Lane. Neither of them appeared very much in other Lion King media aside from Simba's Pride, but I legitimately wonder if both of them being in The Producers around this time is a key reason for their no-show status. No, it's not like they're the only ones. Nala is Vanessa Marshall instead of Moira Kelly, and Scar is James Horan instead of Jeremy Irons. Oh, and there's the hyenas. Shenzi is Moni Mon instead of Whoopi Goldberg, which, again, I wouldn't have noticed if I didn't look it up. They got Cheech Marin back as Bonsai and Jim Cummings back as Ed. This one might have also been archive audio, but Jim Cummings is already in the game for several other roles, so it could be new. Going from the biggest to the smallest, finally we have Space Paranoids. Only 3 characters, just like Olympus Coliseum in the first game, but it's technically even smaller because it should only be 2 actors. Bruce Boxleitner returns as Tron, and then it's just Sark in the MCP. In the original film, both were played by David Warner, who was interested in returning for Kingdom Hearts 2, but had other contractual obligations at the time that prevented it. Shame, we were actually really close to our first all-original actors here. So, since he couldn't do it, of course Corey Burton fills in on both counts. And that's Kingdom Hearts 2. This is actually the game in the series with the most Disney characters, with a total of 60 voiced characters. And 33 of them are the originals for an accuracy percentage of 55%. Not to mention 4 worlds, Beast's Castle, Olympus, Agrabah, and Space Paranoids, that were only 1 away from having everybody. Though with Port Royal still providing an example of a world with no returning actors, it's an improvement, but it's a step forward with a weight still tied around its ankle. After KH2, the series was on a streak of smaller products. Sure, there was Chain of Memories beforehand, and we can't forget VCast, but I mean higher presentation releases that still did the bare minimum when it came to voice acting. Meaning none of the Disney worlds are voiced. Rechain of Memories, 358 Days Over 2, Coded. Birth by Sleep was the first non-numbered Kingdom Hearts game to have production values comparable to the numbered entries, with fully voiced cutscenes everywhere, including the Disney worlds. Something I liked a lot about Birth by Sleep, at least early on, is that it leans into its prequel status by using worlds from earlier Disney movies, starting off with Disney's first feature-length film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, with the Dwarf Wonderlands. Now let's be real here. Snow White came out in 1937. Birth by Sleep came out in 2010. That's 73 years apart. I don't have a way to confirm this, but I think it's safe to assume literally everyone involved in the production of the film was dead by the time Birth by Sleep released. It's also the world with the most Disney characters in this game because 6 of the 7 Clever Boys are voiced. The titular Snow White is voiced here by Carolyn Gardner, replacing Adriana Caselotti. The Prince, that's his name, so I'm assuming his first name is is voiced by James Arnold Taylor, replacing Harry Stockwell. The Queen is voiced by Suzanne Blakesley, replacing Lucille Laverne. The Magic Mirror, Corey Burton instead of Maroney Olsen. And the Dwarves are a group of David Ogden Stiers, James Arnold Taylor, Bill Farmer, Jeff Bennett, Bob Joles, and Corey Burton. Moving on to the Castle of Dreams, we've got another set of unconfirmed actors, with the stepsisters of Anastasia and Drizella. The wiki claims that Russi Taylor is Drizella, and that adds up, but I'm willing to be skeptical on Anastasia. Sure, Gina Tuttle has voiced the character in some Disney princess stuff, but Cinderella 3 was afterwards, where she was voiced by Tress MacNeille, who's also listed in the cast for this game. I just think there's reason for doubt. Other than that, the fairy godmother is also voiced by Russi Taylor, Prince Charming is Matt Nolan, Cinderella is Jennifer Hale, Rob Paulson is both the Grand Duke and Jacques, and Lady Tremaine is also Suzanne Blakesley. Suzanne Blakesley has actually been with the series since the beginning, it's just that I haven't had an opportunity to talk about Maleficent yet. Well, with Enchanted Dominion, that time has finally come. Both Maleficent and Lady Tremaine were originally voiced by Eleanor Audley, so it's fitting that Suzanne Blakesley takes over on both. Maybe because they're functionally the same voice. Jennifer Hale is also the princess here too, though she's succeeding Mary Costa as Aurora instead of Eileen Woods as Cinderella. Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather return as well, voiced by Barbara Derrickson, Russi Taylor, and Tress MacNeille respectively. The funny thing here is that Fauna and Merryweather were originally voiced by Barbara Jo Allen and Barbara Luddy, so between the 2 casts, all 3 of the fairies have been voiced by a Barbara. Oh, and Prince Philip is voiced by Josh Robert Thompson instead of Bill Shirley. After the halfway point of the game, they give up on that whole old movie thing, though they do still try with worlds acting as prequels. Except for Neverland. Sure, Wendy's not a part of things yet, which they could have done because Catherine Beaumont is in this game too as Kyrie's grandmother, but Peter Pan doesn't really have a prequel part. Otherwise, it's the same Pan, Hook, and Smee as before. The only addition is two of the Lost Boys, Slightly and Cubby, voiced by Mason Vale Cotton and Wally Wingert, instead of Stuffy Singer and Robert Ellis. Again, we return to the Olympus Coliseum, which is also back to just having Hercules, Phil, and Hades. Hades and Phil, same as always, Danny DeVito will just not return their calls. They're back to not having Tate Donovan as Hercules, but because this world is set in his childhood days, that makes sense. Just after Josh Keaton had established himself as a definitive Spider-Man, he's back to remind everyone that he was young Hercules in the first movie too. And that just leaves Deep Space, based on Lilo and Stitch, the first Kingdom Hearts world to have every original actor return. And I guarantee they were only able to pull that off because it takes place before Stitch arrives on Earth, so they don't need to include Lilo. David Ogden Stiers has been in the series a couple of times, so it's no surprise he was able to reprise his role as Jumba. Likewise, Kevin Michael Richardson was already filling in for Sebastian in other games, of course he's gone to again. Even Sparky, who I debated including because he's from the TV show and not the movie, is still Frank Welker because why wouldn't he be? Really, Zoe Caldwell as the Grand Councilwoman is the deep cut pick. And Chris Sanders as Stitch, both because this wasn't all that long after his split from Disney over disagreements during the production of Bolt and he moved to DreamWorks, and because he has an odd track record of not returning as Stitch in anything made in Asia, where it's usually Ben Diskin, who you might recognize as young Xehanort. Why don't we ever see the two of them in the same room? So that's Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep, featuring the very first world to include all the original actors. Which is good because it doesn't have a whole lot else. 37 Disney film characters and a total of 7 have their original voices, for a percentage of 18.92%. Of the 6 worlds counted, 4 of them have 0 returning voices, and while Olympus Coliseum was also only one-off, it's the same one it always is. So the common trivia is correct, Deep Space is indeed the first world to include all its original actors. True, but we've come this far, we can't just stop here. I'll just go through the highlights of the next 2 games, starting with Dream Drop Distance. Dream Drop Distance is a pretty small game, only 5 worlds that can be traced back to Disney movies, with one of them not having any voiced characters. And of those 4, 2, Prankster's Paradise and The Grid, feature no returning actors. Yeah, no surprise they couldn't get Jeff Bridges. Bruce Boxleitner returned as Rinsler in the movie, but Rinsler doesn't talk in the game, so that didn't work out. La Cité des Cloches only got 2, and it's 2 of the gargoyles, Victor and Hugo. I can't explain it, but the knowledge that Jason Alexander is in Kingdom Hearts is really weird to me. Like, if these games were a Square Enix DreamWorks crossover and they included B-Movie, would they have gotten Jerry Seinfeld? Oh, and Corey Burton took over as Frollo from Tony J. Country of the Musketeers is the closest to the pack, and it makes sense. The movie it's based on is easily the smallest scale Disney movie to be adapted into Kingdom Hearts as of yet, exclusively starring traditional Disney characters that, for the most part, are already in the games. The only new additions being the Beagle Boys. And it was less than 10 years old at the time of 3D's release, so it's not like it featured older iterations of the characters. I have zero doubt we would have gotten our second 100% were it not for the death of Mickey's voice, Wayne Allwyn, in 2009. He had been voicing the character in Kingdom Hearts prior to his passing. One of his final roles was 358 Days Over 2. But at the end of the day, Dream Drop Distance's small scale has the last laugh. Sure, it only has 10 returning voices, but because it only has 24 characters to be voiced, it has a batting average of 41.67%. So far, the second highest record of the series. So that just leaves Kingdom Hearts 3, because we still don't know when KH4 is coming. And they really set out to correct the problems with earlier games, using movies that were so old that there was no chance they could get the original actors. The oldest this game got was Toy Story from 1995. So, how did they do? Well, the adventure starts in Olympus, and we already have a possibility here. The holdout in every prior iteration of the world was Phil, but Phil doesn't talk in this game. Did they finally do it? Nope, because they added the gods of Olympus, most of whom don't have a line, but Zeus talks. Here voiced by Corey Burton and not Rip Torn. That's a shame. Rip Torn could have been the first actor to be in both Kingdom Hearts and Freddy Got Fingered. The two Pixar worlds, Toy Box and Monsteropolis, I debated including because they're technically not adapting any specific movie, they're original stories taking place in the same worlds. However, when it comes to the characters included in the game, it doesn't make a difference, they're all voiced by the same people no matter which film you're talking about, so I think it's safe to call them the only true actors these characters have. I'm really sorry, Jim Hanks. The Toy Box at least continued Pixar tradition and put John Ratzenberger in there as Ham, right alongside Wallace Shawn returning as Rex. I'm glad that somebody thought to pay him to say the word Bahamut. Now obviously R. Lee Ermey had been dead for some time, so he couldn't reprise his role as Sarge, now voiced by Peter Michael. At least he made it into Crash Bandicoot before he passed.
Ah! Get over here, you little orange sponge!
But there's another army man given special attention in the game, the Corporal, played by Roger Craig Smith. I don't think this specific character ever existed in the movies, but regardless, Roger was never any of the army men, so I guess he's a new actor. The Kingdom of Corona really should have been another slam dunk. Tangled isn't a particularly old movie, the character pool is small, other Tangled-related projects have kept the same actors from the film. The only problem was Rapunzel, originally voiced by Mandy Moore, now voiced by Kelsey Lansdowne. And that's kind of funny, because Mandy Moore has been in Kingdom Hearts before as Aerith in the first game, before being succeeded by Mena Suvari and Andrea Bowen in future games to match Final Fantasy's cast. Monsteropolis only just avoids falling into the Zero camp thanks to Mary Gibbs' archive audio as Boo. Yeah, I'm not surprised that John Goodman, Billy Crystal, and Steve Buscemi didn't answer the call. Well, maybe I am with John Goodman, he agreed to be in the B-movie game. The one weird thing is an unnamed CDA agent played by, once again, Roger Craig Smith. Again, there's no way to confirm whether he's the same character as someone from the movie, but of the several CDA agents in Monsters Inc., Roger was not one of them. Bill Farmer, voice of Goofy, was though. They could have used him and I would have bought it. Arendelle, based on Frozen? They did it. No bones about it, we can finally give out another Every Original Actor award. That's not a surprise. After how much money Frozen made, I think Disney legally owns all of these people. So if someone asks you what Lilo and Stitch and Frozen have in common, there you go. San Francisco again came close, which seemed likely thanks to most of the film's cast already returning for the TV series. The only one they couldn't nail down was Damon Wayans Jr. as Wasabi, who here is played by his TV counterpart Carrie Payton. What's funny is that the other TV replacement, Fred, got his original voice back in the game, TJ Miller. They could only get one, and I bet they're really happy they got that one. Finally, we've got the Caribbean. Obviously, we got a repeat of Kingdom Hearts 2, there's no way they got any of the original actors back. You'd think so. Yeah, sure, they didn't get Johnny Depp or Orlando Bloom or Keira Knightley or Jeffrey Rush. But Joshua Gibbs is still played by Kevin McNally. Godspeed to you, sir, for breaking the trend. And that's Kingdom Hearts 3. Not only did we get our second all-original actors on the list, but this is the first game in the series to have no worlds without any returning voices. A total of 41 voices, with 23 being the originals, meaning 56.1%, the highest of the series. Though, with that said, it's barely above KH2's numbers, while also having far less characters to compare. But I don't know, getting one Pirates of the Caribbean actor earns 3 some brownie points. So how will Kingdom Hearts 4 compare? Well, it's hard to say, seeing as the only world we've seen so far is the fully original Quadratum, and the only Disney movie character we know for sure we're getting is Hades. But if the speculation that Star Wars will be included next time turns out to be true, Let's just prepare for another 0 on the scorecard.
If you guys had the opportunity to continue your character stories on a Disney Plus series, would you take it?
Nope.